Hola mis amores, welcome to the Get Unstuck podcast, a show that teaches you how you can take control of your life so you can let go of the weight of disappointments and release the emotional baggage holding you hostage. I'm your host, Nory. I got it from an Afro-Latina Get Unstuck coach, helping millennial women feeling stuck get out of their heads and overcome their paralysis by getting to know themselves. This is where you learn how to become the woman you want to be, so you can love yourself no matter what, confidently know exactly who you are, have full clarity on what you want, and fearlessly step into your purpose. Hola mis amores, welcome to season 2 of the Get Unstuck podcast, formerly known as the Health Conscious podcast. Since our last season, so many things have changed. So many transitions have happened in my life, and so much growth has been manifested over the past almost a year since I launched the first season of the podcast. I wanted to share some of these changes with you today, and especially prepare you for what to expect of season 2, because some things are going to be a little bit different. The first thing you have noticed is that the name of the podcast is different. It's no longer called the Health Conscious podcast. It is now called the Get Unstuck podcast. And you might be asking yourself, Nory, why did you decide to do that? Why did you change things up on us? Well, it had a lot to do with the changes that have been in my life. It had a lot to do with me facing my fears and opening up about my challenges with depression. At the core, depression is a manifestation of something deeper. It's a manifestation of being stuck, of having a paralysis where you don't know whether to move to your left or to your right, where you lack direction. And as a result, you don't take action. And for many years of my life, about 10 to 12 years, I was in this perpetual state of being stuck. And I had no idea what was going on. I didn't really understand how to exit that state. And it wasn't until last year, I think I can confidently say that I was able to overcome my depression and get to a place where I understood what I was struggling with, so that I can not only come out victorious on the other side, but also help other people come out victorious for themselves. And I am so excited to open up to you about that later in today's episode. Another major change is that I'm going to be having some gentlemen on the podcast this season. I think last season, it was very important for me to focus on talking to women and to addressing issues that are particular to women. And in this season, I'm really excited to bring in men that can give us a different perspective, or how can we utilize the perspective of other people to become the best version of ourselves. This season of the podcast, I'm very committed to helping every single listener become the best version of herself, become the woman that she wants to be. And I found so much joy and learned so much from talking to my husband that I feel like I'm doing a disservice to you as a listener by not sharing some of that perspective on the podcast. So I'm very excited that JP is going to be joining us on the podcast in a few episodes, and I'm going to be having other men joining the conversation. So please look forward to that. I think another change with the podcast this season is that the tea time with Nory series is going to be a little bit different. So I'll be coming on solo episodes once a month instead of twice a month. But that would allow me to interview more guests throughout the month. So you get to hear different perspective from the guests more than you were able to hear in the last season. There's so much I want to share with you right now about the podcast, but I feel like I will be doing you a disservice if I delve into that. Instead, I want to share with you more about my battle with depression so that you can understand where have I been emotionally, where I am right now, and why have I decided to make this transition for the podcast so that it can embody the changes that I've experienced, and it can become a resource for all the women that might be feeling stuck in their lives. So let's get into this depression conversation. So I've been battling depression on and off for about 10 to 12 years. I wasn't diagnosed until 2016, however, but I knew that something was off with me. I used to have this really highs and lows, and during the highs, I would be in a really good place, but then during the lows, I would be in a really, really negative space. And this was something that I've been experiencing, and I didn't really know what was going on, but at the same time, no one around me was in therapy. No one around me was talking talking about them being depressed. So I just thought it was normal. I felt like maybe I was going through a phase and eventually I was going to move on from this phase. So I didn't really take a lot of action towards proactively working and trying to get diagnosed and getting quote unquote help. I instead focused on managing and kind of just enjoying the highs and pushing through the lows because I thought that that's what I was supposed to do. I thought that that's what everybody else was doing. So the journey of depression to me has been one that I've really suffered in silence because I didn't know that I needed help and I also didn't know how to ask for help. So it was the type of thing that when I was going through it, I just really felt like I was alone. And I didn't realize that I was treating the symptoms of my depression as the root of my depression. Like I got really obsessed with becoming healthier physically because I thought that the root of my depression was that I was fat and that I didn't like my body being fat. So if I lost the weight, then I wouldn't be depressed because I would be smaller. And it turns out that I was wrong about that. So things changed for me in 2016. My uncle was murdered that year. For those of you that have been following me for a while, I've shared his story with you all, not only on the podcast, but also on my social media about how it really took me in a dark place. My uncle and I were very close. He was more like a big brother to me. And his death was something that I couldn't have imagined. And I definitely wasn't prepared for the type of pain that I experienced. And I loved him beyond words can ever articulate. And he loved me unconditionally. I would later learn that he was one of the few people in my life that had loved me unconditionally. I didn't have to be anything for this man. He just loved me for who I was. And that's something that I didn't know that I had until after his passing. So looking back, being depressed was draining. You know, I remember trying to convince myself that I was fine. I remember I would tell myself lies on a daily basis, telling myself that nothing was wrong with me, telling myself that I was strong and that I just had to keep pushing forward. I believed the feelings will go away, you know, eventually, but that wasn't the case. And I realized something was seriously wrong when I realized something was seriously wrong with me when I would get overwhelmed with fear every time my husband would get home late. And I'm not even talking about like an hour or 2 hours late. Like if he was late for a few minutes, like I would get really anxious. I would get really scared. I would think that something happened to him. If my phone rang and my family was calling from Honduras, I would feel as though they were going to bring me bad news, like somebody else had passed away. And I really didn't even like picking up the phone at all. I actually went through a period of time where I stopped picking up the phone because I just didn't feel like I wanted to know if anything like that was going on. So it was really hard for me. And I was afraid that everyone I love would leave me. And at the same time, I felt like if I didn't leave the house, I was safe. And I remember just being so afraid, like to the point of paralyzing. Like my fear was so intense. And then at that time, I felt like, okay, something here is not right. But at the same time, I wasn't aware enough to stop the behavior. I just knew that something didn't feel right. And the interesting thing about my battle with depression is that to the person outside looking in, I looked like I had it all together. I was living in DC in this gorgeous apartment on the 15th floor with my handsome, smart husband. I had a job making the most money I've ever had made. Like, how can I be depressed? Like, how can I not be happy in this space? Like everything that I quote unquote wanted was there. And I just felt like that. I felt like I shouldn't be depressed. Like I felt like everything should be fine. And the interesting thing about that was that I wasn't fine. And underneath all of that, I was suffering. And it was one of the most frustrating parts because I wanted help, but I didn't know how to ask for help. And I had never felt that before. I had never been in a place in my life where I wanted people to help me, but I didn't know how to ask for help. And I felt very powerless in that whole situation because I wanted to feel better and I didn't know how. And it was really a tough time for me as an individual, but also for my marriage, because my husband wanted to help me, but he didn't know how to help me. I didn't know how to ask him to help me. So it really put us in a very interesting place in a relationship, a place that we had never been to before. So about 8 months into my depression, after my uncle was killed, my depression hit what I think it's called a peak. Like, it hit its peak point. This was the lowest point that I had been. And in this 8 months, I was really feeling very, very hurt. I was feeling very afraid. I was feeling very paralyzed and terrified. And I remember my husband saying something to the effect of, your uncle wouldn't want this for you. And for the first time, I thought about, what would my uncle want for me? Until this time, I hadn't really thought about that, because I was so consumed by my pain and I couldn't see beyond what was in front of my eyes. So my uncle will always tell me, I want you to do what brings you joy. I want you to do what makes you happy. I want you to do what fills your spirit. And I remember sitting there, and it hit me that I had no idea what those things were for me. I had no idea what made me happy. I had no idea what filled my spirit. I had no idea like who I was. And I decided in that moment that I was going to try to figure that out, because I wanted to honor him. I wanted to honor the things that he wanted for me. And it wasn't until that day, I defined myself by my roles, my role as a wife, my role as a daughter, my role as a sister, as a colleague, my role as a friend, my education level, my job. I had never really had to think about who I was if you remove all those labels. And full transparency, even the thought of my own company petrified me. Like, the fact that I had to be alone and just sit with some of that stuff, it was really scary. It was so scary that I didn't even want to do it. I was afraid of what I was going to uncover. I was afraid of the feelings that I was going to get through. And I just didn't want to deal with that. I just felt like, I'm not ready. I don't want to deal with that. This is too much. So I just did the best thing I could, which was run away from those feelings. And it was hard. It was hard because I wanted to honor my uncle's legacy, but at the same time, I wasn't ready to face myself. I wasn't ready to face my pain. And when I thought about my uncle and how much he loved me, I decided that at least I wanted to try it out. I didn't know if I was going to get answers. I didn't know if I was going to get here or not, or where I was going to get to, but I knew that because of him, I had the courage to try, and I wanted to try. So I decided to go to therapy, because I realized that I needed things to change. Talking to my husband wasn't enough. Talking to my friends wasn't enough. And I think I had gone way past my allotted friend conversation around these topics. Like, I think my friends, they wanted to help me. My husband wanted to help me. But once again, the thing about depression is that you don't know how to be helped. So you don't know how to ask for help. And people start feeling like you actually don't want to be helped. And I began just feeling like, okay, I gotta talk to an expert. So I found a therapist, and I went through my insurance and found a woman of color, which was very important to me because I wanted to talk to someone that understood me, not just as a client or patient, but really as another woman, fellow woman of color. So she was very, very helpful to me. She helped me understand what was going on. She opened my eyes to how these patterns were working and how they played a role in my life. And she made me feel like I wasn't tripping. She made me feel like my pain was real. She made me feel like I wasn't making these things up. And for the first time in my process, I felt like I'm so happy that someone understands it, that someone gets it. And I'll always be very grateful for my therapist because she helped me see beyond my pain. She was the first person, I believe, that made me feel heard and that made me feel seen and understood. And it was in a different way. It wasn't that my family wasn't trying to hear me and understand me and see me, but they just couldn't quite do it in the way that this person did. And I'm really, really grateful for her. So once I made sense of my feelings, I started asking my therapist to teach me how to get to the root of this, to teach me how to keep myself from being depressed again. And I realized that she was actually just focusing on helping me manage my depression. And I'm like, sis, I don't want to just manage the depression. I want to get to the bottom of the depression so that I can free myself from the depression. And I felt that our sessions weren't as helpful anymore. So I didn't want to keep suffering. And I decided that I was going to stop seeing her and take matters into my own hands and just really figure things out on my own, because I felt that the process for me, it was incomplete and I needed a complete process. I really wanted to heal from this. I was committed to my healing and I wanted to do whatever it took to get there. So when I stopped seeing my therapist, I became obsessed with learning about self-healing. Like, I have this personality that once I'm obsessed with something, it's done. I'm going to sort it out. I'm going to figure it out some way or another. So I began reading like my life depended on it, because it actually did. My life did depend on this information. So in the past, like a year and a half, I've read anywhere from 50 to 75 books on self-healing. I study spiritual leaders like Eckhart Tolle, like Don Miguel Ruiz, like Marianne Williamson, like tons of other people. And I just kind of went through a lot of the authors that Oprah recommends in Super Soul Conversation. And I just read all their work. And I became fascinated with how they did the work. And it opened my eyes in a whole different way. It just gave me a blueprint to how to heal beyond managing. And I decided to become determined to figure it out for me, to determine what Nory needed for her, to clarify what Nory needed for her healing. And that became my mission. So as much as I wanted to ignore my fears, I just wanted to ignore the feelings that I was afraid of, I decided that it was time to face these feelings, because all the books that I read that talked about self-healing all had a message that led to, you need to turn inward. You need to turn inside. You need to start facing these fears. You need to start facing these emotions. You have to stop running away. So I decided I was going to do that. I was going to stop running away and I was going to face these emotions. And it didn't matter how painful it was. It didn't matter how hard it was. I was going to do it. And I was going to start one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. So I started finding as painful it was. I tried it. I began to unpack my emotional baggage and review every experience individually, taking time to decide if it served me, if it didn't serve me, and then digging as deep as possible until I found the source of each of my triggers, to the point that I'm still unpacking. Because when you start unpacking your pain and your emotional baggage, you realize you have so much of it to unpack. So it's a process that I know is going to take me years to do, but it has really helped me overcome my depression. It has helped me get to a place where I can now understand me beyond these labels. It has given me to a place where I can live a truth, my truth, without focusing all these things that I thought were important in the past. So I found pain that I didn't know I was holding on to. Pain from my childhood, pain from my parents, pain from the way I was raised, pain from friends and family members. I found things there that I didn't even know were there. And I understood why this process is so hard for people, because in order for you to become the best version of yourself, in order for you to heal from your depression, you need to go and face these things. And this is a very painful process, because there are a lot of things about us that we don't like, because we are focused on thinking that we are certain things the way we're supposed to be, the way people say we're supposed to act. And we force ourselves to see ourselves as who we think we should be, instead of accepting ourselves for who we truly are. And that was something that I learned during that time. And it's gotten to the point that now, as soon as something triggers me, I acknowledge that this particular situation is triggering me, and I go deep into that feeling. And then I unravel this feeling very carefully until I get to the root, so that it doesn't affect me the same way it used to in the past. And it could be a process that at the beginning is really draining and is really tiring and is really exhausting. But the more you do it, the more you practice this, the better you get at it, and the more control you have over yourself, and the more the more you are likely to overcome your depression, and not only overcome it, but keep it from coming back. So I decided that I wanted to do this for other women. We will be right back after this brief message. Hola, mis amores. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Get Unstuck podcast. I love having these conversations because they help shed light on the issues many millennial women feeling stuck are struggling with on a daily basis as they look for ways to overcome their paralysis. Can you do me a favor? If you find this episode helpful, please leave me a review and tell me what connected with you about this conversation. It will help me bring you guests that you're going to love, and you may catch your thoughts during our fan love segment. Now back to the episode. I decided that I wanted to help them the way I had figured out how to help myself, because I couldn't keep this information to myself. And over the past 9 years, I've been helping women become healthier by teaching them how to meal prep, how to eat healthier, how to exercise, how to develop boundaries with other people. I've really delved into this work because I wanted to see women become the happiest version of themselves. And I will realize that I noticed the women would lose weight. A lot of them wanted to lose the weight, so they would lose the weight, but then the weight will come back. So I started wondering, like, why is the weight coming back? Like, why is this an issue that these women are dealing with? And it's something that is not unique to these women that I was working with. It's also part of something I was dealing with. Like, I will lose weight, and then at some point I will gain some of that weight back. And I realized that even if I teach you how to meal prep, how to eat better, how to exercise, how to maybe have a few boundaries here and there, how to say no, unless you deal with the emotional pain that you're feeling inside, unless you take out your emotional baggage and we start unpacking it and seeing it for what it is and forgiving ourselves and healing and accepting and surrendering, unless we do that work, the weight is always going to come back, because the weight is a manifestation of how you feel inside about yourself. And if you don't deal with those feelings about yourself, if you don't love yourself, if you don't learn how to give yourself unconditional love, then the weight will come back, because you will eat the things that lead to that place, because you're going to try to continue to mask those feelings. And in order to really heal, in order to see long-lasting results, we have to get to the root. And unlike what I believed, that the physical part was the root, that's not the root. The emotional part is the root, is the reason. So we have to stop treating the symptoms as the cause and get to the actual root of the problem and treat that, so that we don't have to deal with the symptom in the first place. So I understood something really, really powerful, that if I could help women understand why they are depressed and teach them how to keep themselves from being depressed, they won't have to worry about managing their depression. And to me, that's the most important part, because over the past 9 years, I've learned that if we are able to deal with that, then the weight won't be a problem. If I can teach women how to love themselves, then they will see that they have to make better decisions for themselves. And that includes food, that includes exercise, that includes sleep, that includes water, that includes all these elements that I wanted to help them learn in the first place. So I really decided that I wanted to do this, because overcoming my depression encouraged me to trust myself with myself. It gave me the freedom to do what I wanted to do. It gave me the freedom to leave DC, to leave my job that I thought it was security, and instead to bet on myself and to move to Florida, where it's warm, close to the beach. It gave me the courage to start to live my truth in a way that I didn't have to apologize for it. And there are things that today are part of my day-to-day that 2 years ago seemed impossible. If 2 years ago someone would have told me that I would be doing this right now, I would have been like, you crazy, you tripping, you wilding, no way, no way. And here I am living the happiest life I've ever lived. I could seriously die tomorrow and I would be happy, because I've lived my life. I figured out my truth, and I've gotten the courage to do it. Even when at times people didn't understand, that didn't keep me. And knowing that I have discovered more about Nory, knowing that I love Nory more. And as a result, I get to love you guys more. I get to share more of me with you and help you love yourself more. That it's enough for me. And I'm so grateful for having that. And once I knew I had that for me, it just made sense that I was going to share that with the women that I've been helping for years. And I have to say, my clients have been the biggest blessing in my life. I started working with them last year, and we've been focused in on what they need. I create a space where they come with their needs, and I'm available to them. And how often can we go to someone and say, hey, this is what I need? And they are paying close attention. They are loving us. They are caring for us. They are keeping us, and they make space for us. It's an experience that not a lot of people have. It's an experience that I didn't have for a while. And some of us don't know how to ask for that. Some of us don't know who can give us that. Some of us don't know that we need that. But when we can come to someone and just say, hey, this is what I need, and they're available to our need, it's a powerful process. And my clients have been the biggest blessing I could have ever asked for. Being able to help them, seeing them go through these challenges, being able to see them grow and flourish makes all my work worth it. It makes our time invaluable. And I just feel really honored to do this work, to help these women, because I was these women. I am them. I'm in a different space, but I am them. I was them. I know what the pain that they're feeling. I am these women, and I know the pain that they're feeling, and I want them to know that they're not alone and that I am here for them in any shape or form that I can. So my role is really to guide them. You know, my role is to hold their hand and to be there with them every step of the way, to let them know that I'm not going to leave their side, to let them know that there's a way to experience light without getting to the end of the tunnel. And when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling unfulfilled, when you're feeling stuck, it's hard to see beyond what's in front of your eyes. It's hard to see beyond your pain. It's hard to see beyond your disappointment, beyond your self-doubt. And through my work, in my experience, I give women that freedom back. I help them find that freedom within themselves. And I'm so grateful that they trust me with that, because it's the greatest gift I could ever receive and I can ever give. And it's a gift that I had to first give myself. So I wanted to share some of the things I've learned from working with these women, some of the lessons that have really stuck out to me, because I hope they will help you. And I know they will help you. So the first thing I've learned is that you can only give what you have. This is a line that I come back to often, because a lot of us get really caught up when we don't get what we want from people. We assume people don't want to give us what we want. We assume people want to hurt us and they're out to get us, so they don't give us what we want. When in reality, people can only give us what they have. And sometimes people just don't have it to give. Sometimes people want us to love them, to care for them, to protect them, to listen to them, to understand them. But sometimes we don't have that. And we have to give those people grace. And we have to give ourselves that grace, because we don't always have what people want from us either. So that's something that I've learned, that we have to treat people with more kindness and compassion and love and respect, because people can only give us what they have, whether they like it or not, whether we like it or not. The second thing I realized is that people hurt in silence because they're afraid of being treated less than because of their pain. And that's something that I felt. I certainly felt that way in the past. I felt like I couldn't really open up about my pain because I didn't want people to treat me differently. I don't want people to think I was crazy or bugging or whatever. Like, you know, those were the words that were resonating in my mind. That was the experience that I was afraid of having. So I just didn't say anything. I just stayed quiet because I was so afraid of that rejection. And a lot of us do that because we are afraid. And I want to encourage you that if that's you, use that fear to propel you forward. If people are going to treat you differently, that's just feedback. You don't need those people in your life. So this is a good opportunity to use that pain that you're feeling to really get clarity on who is in your circle and how much do these people really care about you. And as painful as it is more painful to keep people in your life that are not there for your best interest. So don't be afraid to open up about your pain because you're going to be treated differently. Use that courage so that you can talk about your pain and your testimony can help other people, starting with yourself, to heal and to get to the root of your pain. Number 3, taking accountability is not about who to blame. It's about the fact that you get to decide. A lot of us want to point the finger. It's easier. It's much less dramatic to point it at us. If we point it at somebody else, we don't have to deal with it, right? But when you take accountability, you are able to make a decision for yourself. And the thing about blame is that it doesn't matter who is to blame. That's not important because no one is to blame. People have only been teaching us what they know. People have only been giving us what they have. So how can they give you something else? They don't have that. It's almost ridiculous that we expect that from people and that we want that from people because it's such an unfair ask. It's like asking you to give people something that you don't have and then blaming you because you didn't give it to them. How can you do that? You don't have that. So what I want you to take away from that point is that taking accountability is an empowering element. A lot of us feel like if we don't decide, if we don't make a decision wasn't made. But I've learned that indecision is also a form of decision. So if you're going to make a decision either way, you might as well make a decision that's in your best interest, because no matter what the decision is or isn't, you're going to have to deal with those consequences. So it's in your best interest to make a decision, because at the end of the day, you are making the decision regardless. So a lot of us feel like if I don't decide, it's not my fault. But as we just learned, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, because you still have to deal with the consequences. So you might as well make a decision and stand by your decision and make a decision based on what you really want to do, on what makes you happy, because it's your life at the end of the day. Number 4, we are afraid to trust ourselves with ourselves because it means that we can blame others for our pain. If you trust yourself with you, then you understand that you are responsible for you in the situations with you put yourself. And sometimes we don't want to accept that accountability and responsibility because we put ourselves in situations that are not in our best interest. So it's easier to blame that into someone else, because taking accountability will mean that we put ourselves there and we understand that. And that can be really painful. But at the same time, once you realize that you can feel that pain, you can also feel the joy of changing things for yourself and doing the things that make you happy, that bring you joy and that fill your spirit. The last thing I want to share with you is that people sacrifice who they truly are to make other people happy and to fit in a desired mold. A lot of us are acting. We act like we like our jobs. We act like we are happy in our relationships. We act like we love all of our kids all the time. We act like we're living a perfect life. I'm going to be the first one to tell you my life is not perfect based on what society thinks perfection should be, but it's the life I want to live for myself and my partner. And I couldn't be happier with that. And I'm happy that I've gotten the courage to stop pretending, to stop being something that I'm not, to make people happy at the expense of who I am. Because filtering who you are and changing who you are to be someone that somebody else potentially can like is not worth it if you don't get to be who you really are. It's not worth it if you have to hide who you are. At some point, you're going to get tired of pretending. And when that happens, those people are not going to want to be around you anymore. So you have to ask yourself, do I love myself enough to pick me, to choose me every time? Or am I going to continue acting and pretending and choosing other people? And that's the part that we have to spend some time thinking about, because a lot of us choose other people because we want that instant gratification. But on the long term, that's not sustainable. And at some point, you're going to get tired of pretending. So if that's you right now, I encourage you to use this as your reminder that it's okay to be you. It's okay to not want to do certain things, to not want to be in certain company, to want to spend some time in solitude and silence. It's okay for you to do things that you want to do, even if people don't want to do them. That's fine, because it's your life. You know, you only live once. It's your life. You get to decide how you live your life. So if you're a millennial woman and you're watching this and you're feeling stuck, if you feel unfulfilled, if you are struggling with depression, I want you to know that I see you, that I feel your pain, that I understand you, and that more importantly, I am here for you. I am here to help you go through this. And I'm ready and excited and willing to guide you through this journey, because you don't have to go through this alone. I did, not all the way, but a huge chunk of the way, and it was hard. And you don't have to go through that by yourself. And that's why I'm dedicating my life to this work, because women shouldn't have to go through this alone. And we should have the tools. We have the tools to remove this pain from our bodies, remove this pain from our life. And it's just a matter of getting them. And some of us just need to get a little bit of help to get these tools. And I'm here to give you that help. So I I'm excited for our journey together. I'm excited for what I Am Healthy Fit can do for you. I'm excited for our podcast this upcoming season and the women I'm going to be talking to and the stories I'm going to be sharing. I'm excited to be here, to just be available to you, because that's what I wish someone would have had for me when I was going through my experience. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Get Unstuck podcast. I know you have endless options you can listen to while driving, working out, riding the train, or cooking your favorite meal. I truly appreciate that you've decided to spend your time with me. I hope today's conversation left you feeling a little less stuck and empowered to take action towards becoming the woman that you want to be. If you found today's episode helpful, please show us some love by leaving us a 5-star or 6-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Spotify, Stitcher, or Google Play. To get the show notes, head to IamHealthyFit.com and make sure you join the mailing list. You'll get access to a free training video to help you overcome your paralysis, get out of your head, and love yourself no matter what, starting today. If you want to keep the conversation going, you can find me on Instagram at Nory Pouncil. That's NoryPouncil. Hasta luego.